everyone. Good evening and good morning. My name is Enoch Su. Like Jenny was saying, I work with Jenny at GROWDynamics, and I'm also full-time a transfer pricing economist at BDO Hong Kong. I worked in the transfer pricing international tax consulting business for the past 20 years or so in China, Hong Kong, US. One of my research interests actually is in ethics and economics for business organization, and I started that way early on when I got introduced into the religion and economic space. So business ethics, social, cultural norms, and all of these things have become part of my day-to-day interests. So hopefully we can have more interaction later on, and hopefully you'll find our webinar interesting, and I'll pass that to Professor Galloway.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Laura Galloway, and I'm a Professor of Business and Enterprise at the Edinburgh Business School, which is at Heriot-Watt University. I have a long career of teaching and research in leadership and entrepreneurship. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I have been teaching exclusively MBA level entrepreneurship and leadership courses, including the Edinburgh Business School's big MBA course on leadership for distance learning students throughout the world. And I wrote the EBS online course for that as well. So yeah, looking forward to this session and working with you for the next hour or so. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. So let's start now. Okay, I suppose for most of the participants today, you have some knowledge about ESG, and some of you may have already done a lot for your organization in terms of corporate social responsibility. A lot of the businesses are trying to do good in the community, and we are all quite familiar with CSR. But at the moment, this new term, ESG, comes along. Basically, the difference is that ESG, we need to incorporate social and environmental concerns into our business strategy and also the operation. Instead of like ESG, we could have done something on the side, something that is probably not as core of the business. You can, for example, if you do some community service or even try to advocate some consumer issues or even labor issues at the site, that's also CSR. But now in ESG, not only we want to do good, we also need to make it very systematic. We need to integrate it into the business in a way that there is a very well put together ESG report. So a lot of you might be aware that Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they have a requirement for ESG disclosure from all listed companies, not only in Asia, in Europe, in Hong Kong, just because it is a mandatory requirement. They also need to know that the organizations can also demonstrate genuine concern about these issues socially and environmentally. And so this is really a new landscape for corporates to really look at how each of the departments can work together to really incorporate ESG into the business. And at the same time, a lot of us have heard of something called green finance, sustainable investing. These are people who will also look at how businesses will have a sustainable development. not just for short and medium term, but also for long term as well. So it is really important to come together to look at how best we can do ESG. It is relatively a new concept in Hong Kong, although a lot of the companies are doing very well. But at the same time, we feel like this is really the time that, especially if we want to really do good through the business, not just to do it at the side, then we have to come together and collectively be like-minded group of people and try to develop this and try to contribute to the global community. So that is why we have this session together, and thank you for being here. Now, a few things that we need to think. For ESG, because we really need to demonstrate our genuine concern. How does it work? Because a report probably doesn't really show whether we're genuinely concerned about issues. So what are the things that we can do as organizations or as managers and leaders to make that happen? And the second thing that we are thinking is that everybody is talking about value creation. So who are the value creators? Are they the leaders, the managers, the board, or everybody, and how does it work? The third thing is about ethics, because today the topic is ethical leadership, how we apply that into ESG. So what is ethics? And I'm sure everybody knows that ethics is not a new concept, it's a timeless concept. And also, as you know, that this webinar is also inspired by Adam Smith, the moral philosopher hundreds of years ago, but his impact is still pretty much there, not in the Western country alone, but also in Hong Kong. A lot of you might know that Adam Smith is also the invisible hand behind Hong Kong prosperity and how these things work. And also we want to also introduce Adam Smith, his two major theories. One is Wealth of Nations. A lot of people know about Wealth of Nation, which is very, very renowned theory. But the other one, moral sentiment, is something that a lot of the business people might not place so much focuses on. But it is exactly because of his theory of moral sentiment that he has the power and influence in terms of helping people to experience their impact in the workplace. Also to look at how work and life can bring good life to people all around the world. So one thing I want to also announce and introduce to everyone here quite excitedly is that Professor Galloway from Edinburgh Business School, which is also my business school, have this really wonderful project with Panmure House. Panmure House is the latest home of Adam Smith, and the school has basically renovated Panmure House and make it a global thought center. This project is also helping people to come together to think about issues for the world, issues beyond just day-to-day business running. So what is this project looking like, and what is the relationship of this project with GROWDynamics and also with the ethical leadership program that we are talking about here? So this is a very short video to show you a little bit of this initiative.
Theory of Moral Sentiments was Smith's first book and also his last book. First published in 1759, it's a philosophical treatise on virtue, on sympathy, and on how together these notions govern all our social interactions. It was the foundation stone for all of Smith's later thought, and he continued to work on it for the rest of his life, right up until his death in 1790. This is the so-called definitive 6th edition of the book, completed here in the house in the year of his death. It's often overlooked in favour of its more famous sibling, but it is every bit as important to Smith's wider project of creating what he called a comprehensive science of man. Smith is sometimes quoted as being a proponent of laissez-faire capitalism and unbridled self-interest, but the theory of moral sentiments disproves this. Its opening sentence reads, "How selfish soever man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others and render their happiness necessary to him, though he derives nothing from it except the pleasure of seeing it."
Well, so the quote is basically 42 words, a very long sentence by modern standards, but it's a really great ethos. It talks about even though people are pretty selfish, they do really care about other people's happiness as well. So how does it translate into the reality in the commercial world today, especially when everybody is talking about the dilemma, the ethical dilemma, but also at the same time, really strive to do well in ESG, no matter is it public company, private companies, local or multinational enterprises. So it's really something that we are keen to find out. So over to Enoch to tell us a little bit more of your experience here, Enoch.
Certainly, thank you.
Thank you.
It's exactly, what's the beginning of the theory of moral sentiments all about. That is what's interesting about Adam Smith. I started as an economist, and the wealth of nations was the key cornerstone of what I studied. Profit seeking, self-seeking, utilization, maximization, all of these things were very important in the study of neoclassical economics. And that's exactly what drives most businesses. How do you balance your balance sheet, your financial statement, and how do you pay your tax in today's globalized and digitalized world? Adam Smith actually has this very interesting quote that talks about the character of commercial society, that actually he has a much better understanding than we gave him credit to, in terms of game theory. We all thought that game theory came in the 20th century, the early 20th century. No, actually he started it. He actually talked about, if there are more people engaged in the same business transactions, then there's less chances for people to cheat. If it's a one-off game, then, if you go to a restaurant, it's only one time. It's very less likely for you to pay the tips to the waitresses or the bartender, because you won't see them again. But if you tend to patron that restaurant multiple times, it's more likely for you not to cheat them, because you want good services. And that's exactly what the importance of business transactions when it comes to business ethics. And Adam Smith already talked about it long time ago. Next slide, please. And when we're talking about ESG, of course, like Jenny talked about, there's the environmental aspect, the social aspect, and the governance aspect. Many parts of the world, companies already dived into corporate social responsibility. In Hong Kong, recently, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange started, the measurement of ESG. So it becomes a additional burden for a lot of companies that wants to go public, wants to be listed in Hong Kong Stock Exchange, because they have an extra measurement and extra criteria to check their boxes before they can go public. And that's also affect their financial performance, their resources. They need to put more people to go and investigate exactly what kind of E, S, and G they are performing. And most of these publicly listed companies, they're not just in Hong Kong. They're in multiple parts of the world. There are multiple multinational enterprises. So these M&Es, what we call them, they actually have an increase in cost. They have their bottom line, their profitability has been impacted just simply because of the ESG requirement, the disclosure requirement by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And I've seen a lot of those companies that's actually not quite pulling the brakes, but at least they need to slow down and really reinvestigate the whole M&Es. You know, maybe it's a UK company wants to list it in Hong Kong, and then they have their manufacturing sites in China and Cambodia, and then a development facilities in Ireland and Luxembourg and the US, and distribution network all over the world. That's very complex when it comes to looking at each part of the environment. What's the impact? What's the social impact? And their governance, how does that governance goes into their whole company business strategy? In our globalized world, we always ask that a lot of people, and particularly in today's political, very sensitive world, business and environment and society go hand in hand. And we know that we've seen labor exploitation, child labor, and that's a big no-no. We heard it about the Nike cases, right? And cyber crimes, sexual harassment in workplace, a lot of all these things. And of course, right now, the biggest thing, you know, in this part of the world, north of Hong Kong and the rest of the world, a lot of finger pointing has to do with IP theft. And where are you going to put your intellectual property? And that's actually, it's part of the social norms. It's part of the governance that businesses needs to take into consideration. So from a multinational company standpoint, ESG and business ethics has become very important because, for instance, go back to the UK headquarter. If it's a UK headquarter, do they really know how the culture, the society, the environment is like when you go to work in Vietnam, when you're going to open a factory in Australia or in New Zealand? It's far away, even though you speak English, but a lot of things are different. So all of these things actually are driving the local countries and the headquarters or the management of these companies. There are going to be conflicts, but hopefully ESGs and business ethics are going to come in to bridge these kind of conflicts. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about ethical leaders, and that's exactly what ESG is all about, environment, social, and governance. And so when we're talking about business strategy, of course, profit maximization, shareholder values increase, or at least you need to optimize it, your share value, if you're publicly listed, right? And then there are actually a lot of stakeholders that you need to take into consideration. It's not only those actually invest in your company, but if you are in China, then you have the social class, the people who work for you, the people's family, the workers' family. And then there are lots of other things like the infrastructure, how you're going to help build the water system, the electricity systems. All of these things play a role in the ESG. And growth in business actually has a, can we go back a slide? Growth business strategy actually has to do with the sustainability of resources. What kind of resources? Of course, E is the environmental resource. We also have the physical resources. We also have the human resources. You and I who work for a school, a company, or anything, or even if you're a homemaker, there is a human resource element that you will be impacted by the business strategy that you go out because you are a consumer. Success in the workplace, of course, is also very, very important to the business management to consider, because that is no longer just a profit element. That is no longer a share value element. It's also the quality of life of the people, not only the workers, but the society as a whole. And like I said earlier, stakeholders, there are a lot of stakeholders in different societies, especially for this globalized world. When you're US companies working in Ecuador, you need to be aware of the Ecuadorian social culture, their order, and the cultural norms. How do you take care of that part of the world other than not to exploit? It's not as passive as before. So as we talk about all the ESG elements, we also need to go into the next part would be the ethical leadership portion. And I pass it to Professor Galloway.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and tie up all of this conversation about business and business ethics and ethics in the economy to what this means in organisations and what the implications are in terms of leadership. And I'm going to take two quick but broad approaches. First of all, we need to explore what we mean. What is leadership and what's it got to do with business and why? The second theme really is why is ethical business an issue? Why is it a thing? Surely business is business. The Wealth of Nations really proposes a laissez-faire attitude towards the economy. So has ethics actually got a place? So let's start with the what. What do we mean by leadership in the first place? And leadership this is just a quick, on your screen, a quick, easy definition of leadership. It's the process of giving purpose or direction to effort and causing people to expend effort towards that purpose, okay? So it's getting people to do stuff that you want them to do for the benefit of the organisation. That's all that leadership is. We all kind of know this intuitively. However, why is it important? Well, it's the single most important factor that influences performance. So the difference between unsuccessful and successful businesses is most often about the leadership. And indeed, the difference between successful and really successful, stratospheric businesses is usually about the leadership as well. Okay, so that's what leadership is. And I don't know if I can click on this. No, I can't. Yeah, thank you. What it's not is telling people what to do and intimidating them into doing it. Okay, it's about trying to extract best effort from people in order that they do stuff that you want them to do that's in the interests of your organisation and yourself. And how does this tie into Adam Smith and Adam Smith's theories? Well, Smith says it's by treaty, barter and by purchase that we obtain from one another the greater part of those mutual good offices which we stand so in need of. Okay, so what he's suggesting is that actually capitalism is an exchange and leadership is no different. Now that exchange might be reward and punishment, but in the modern ethical world, and if you think about it in the context of him also writing the theory of moral sentiments, this exchange is about the exchange of effort and benefit. It's a relational activity, okay? And ethics has to be at the heart of that, because you can't get other people to be excellent by shouting at them and intimidating them, okay? You can only get it by exchanging respect, okay? So if we move to the next slide, okay, that's all very well,
the theory of moral sentiments was written in 1759, and The Wealth of Nations was written in 1776. What on earth has this got to do with the modern world? And actually, it's interesting because we seem to have come full circle, where it's almost more relevant now than it was then. When The Wealth of Nations was written, there was a huge banking crisis in Scotland. The Ayrshire Bank had just collapsed. This is ringing bells with us. The modes of working, the Industrial Revolution was well underway, and the modes of working were just not serving our interests as well as they might. And it's really interesting that at the moment, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure you're familiar with, these are also in response to the fact that the ways of working, the 2008 crash, all of these crises of capitalism have prompted a response that's more sympathetic and recognises the need for ethics in business. And so the principles, I'm not going to read you the 17 SDGs, but essentially they're about the fact that it is unethical to have a world where there is poverty, where there's hunger, that we must take responsibility for things like well-being and equality and sustainability. And key to them all is responsibility. And ethics is about responsibility. It's about complex decision-making, particularly if you're a leader, and choosing what's right. So can we just move to the next slide? Essentially, if you just in modern leadership theory is essentially endorses the fact that good leadership, ethical leadership is good leadership. So let me just give 4 reasons why ethical leadership is a good thing for business, okay? So let's take the first one, the moral case. Just one more click. Yeah, thank you. So the moral case is that, you know, the distinction between right and wrong, and as Enoch already pointed out, that actually varies quite considerably wherever you are in the world. But there are basic principles that we all understand between good and evil, right and wrong. And the moral case is that, are you doing the right thing by the people who work for you, by the customers that you have, by the other stakeholders in your organisation? Are you doing the right thing? Okay. Now, the reason I highlight this, because morality, we could spend all day talking about morality, but there's an issue with people using the word good. Okay. So, and I don't know if it does better in Cantonese, but or in Mandarin even. In English, good is not a great word, okay? Because good means effective, and good also means virtuous, okay? Now, we talk about good leaders, and there are examples all over the world of great leaders, excellent leaders. They are really, really good at it, who are doing things that we consider to be morally reprehensible, okay? That we would not want to subscribe to a moral level. So it's this distinction between vice and virtue. And what I do in my job is that I am hoping that I am advocating people being effective leadership, but also at the same time being leaders for the greater virtue, okay? So both, all right, but they can't be confused. So there's the moral, so that's the first one, the moral case. Can we move on to the second one, the organisational case? Now, in the slide, a couple of slides ago, there was that cartoon graphic of the man sort of shouting at the other man. This creates a culture of a toxic culture within organisations. If you've got command and control that's actually stepped over the line into being about over scrutiny, micromanagement, intimidation, bullying, firstly, it's just not good leadership. You will not extract best effort by bullying people, okay? What you'll extract is the minimum that they can get away with before they can leave your organisation. And toxic leadership, it gives away your power, okay? It creates an environment that's not productive and toxic. People wouldn't want to do the things that you want them to do. And this ultimately leads to lower effectiveness amongst participants and therefore has a negative impact on performance. So from a logical organizational point of view, leadership that is not underpinned by ethics and is not coming at stakeholders, staff, clients, customers, the wider community, if you're not coming at it from an ethical standpoint, then you're going to create ultimately a toxic culture, and that toxicity will be bad for sales, bad for performance, bad for morale. So there is an organizational case why good, moral, effective, inclusive leadership is actually good for business. And the most excellent companies that we have on the planet just now are very aware of that. Okay, so that's the organizational case. Let's move on to the personal risk case. So as leaders, there's also my personal risk. Enoch talked a little bit there about this cultural relativism, about how what's okay to do in one culture is perhaps not okay to do in another culture. And as leaders, particularly when we're multinational leaders, when we're in organizations, just like Heriot Watt is, that is trading in different places and in different cultures and to different types of customers and with different types of stakeholders, one size doesn't fit all. So the moral values of head office or my moral values might not be as relevant on the other side of the planet as they are to me at home. So you have to take that into account. But there comes a point where your moral compass has to be sort of your guide as well. Now, whether that is inspired by some inherent thing in you or your religion or whatever it is, but we all have a sort of set of core values. And we need to work within them, you know, or we have trouble living with ourselves, okay? So there's the things that you have to take into account is how much am I compromising my organization? How much am I compromising my own personal values? Am I in line with the cultural values of the organization, okay? So these are all things that you need to sort of work out as a leader. Am I comfortable with this? Am I comfortable working in these parameters? And then critically, am I acting within the laws of the land that I'm in? Okay, because where you've compromised yourself too much and you've crossed too many lines, you're actually putting yourself at enormous risk by not taking account of the moral case in many cases. And I think that we can all probably cite examples of people, very high profile people who've fallen foul of those lines. Okay, so this idea that as a leader, you have a responsibility to yourself as well. Okay, and then the very last case, why is it, and keep going, clicking through, why is it important to be an ethical leader? Well, there's the business case as well. I think that there has been in recent years, or maybe in the last couple of decades, the idea that business is working in opposition to society and morality. And that's true, business can, but it doesn't have to. And business is, business and profit can also be moral virtues. It is business and organizational success that creates jobs. It is jobs that put food on tables. It is jobs that create tax revenue. It is tax revenue that creates schools and hospitals. Business is a underpinning and integral part of society. To have bent your ethics so much that you're no longer a viable business is itself unethical too. So the idea that ethics sits in opposition to business is not the case. And I think that Adam Smith was very clear on that, is that they sit side by side. It is not just selfishness and capitalism at the expense of everybody else. It is selfishness and capitalism with consideration of the greater and wider good. Okay, and that's how you would extract best effort. That's how you would rationalize the sorts of decisions that you would need to make as a leader. And I'm just going to finish. I'm going to hand it back to Jani and Enoch, but I'm just going to finish with the idea that we talk about ethical leadership and we talk about leadership and business ethics, and these are short, glib, quite easy to understand conceptualizations. very complex things to do. A lot of complex thinking, a lot of complex analysis, a lot of weighing up the pros and cons and looking at your position in the world and your organisation's position in the world. So developing your skills on reflection, developing your skills on how to influence people, these are important and critical if you're going to be a good leader and if you're going to be a leader for good. And I'll leave on that note and pass back to Enoch and Jani.
Thank you, Laura. So clearly leaders have to also lead for good. So that is a good leader. How does a leader behave ethically, but at the same time, making other people behave ethically so as to create an ethical value chain is really important. And that becomes the core foundation for good governance structure. I just mentioned at the beginning that many executives think that probably they are the main people who can create value for the organizations, but actually most value creation happens in the interplay between staff and customers. So it is not just top down. Many times it is bottom up as well. But at the same time, in order to help employees to participate in ethical behavior, we need to form a new system to enable and engage each other. But most importantly is to fuel them with purposes so as to, one, establish ethical position, communicate the value and the standards, vision, and goals of the organization across other functional departments. The ethical leader also need to, most importantly, motivate employees, motivate other people, stakeholders as well. And through the new system and new matrix, monitor ethical performance and at the same time, ensure continuity. Now, this whole thing is not just a system. This whole thing is not just a statement or a target. It has to be filled with purposes, which is pretty much intrinsic. It is not just extrinsic. There are many books out there, business books that are talking about purposes. For example, a lot of people are subscribing to Harvard Business Review. They recently have a book called Alive at Work. They talk about neuroscience, how to help people love what they do, how to help them experience the impact of their work. And there is another pretty well-selling book called Purpose Incorporated by John Wood, which has been selling very well in Hong Kong as well. They also talk about it is really important to share the purposes across the board. So our interests and our passion can be aligned so as to really fulfill ESG. It is something talking about, it is a culture that we need to create. So in that sense, we say we need to create a strong culture of ethics and ESG through, number one, integrated management. Again, it is not just from the top, it is influenced by the top, but at the same time to enable different departments to work together. And different geographical markets, for example, like the multinational enterprise, to also work together as well. It is not just the headquarters in Europe dictating what to do in Asia, not knowing what is the social value that we are trying to create here. So it is that kind of cultural understanding and functional understanding, and also to take into multiple perspectives so as to come up with a shared vision and mission. This is a kind of system thinking for symbiotic relationships, which is very important. Now, as a leader, we also need to communicate, not just to communicate in order for people to understand what it is. It is also for people to share the passion for a common future, so as to let them come up with innovative ideas, how we can collectively create this common future, how to look at the world differently, how to connect our business with the society. That takes a lot of passion all together as a team. And this part, promoting intrinsic desire, I think is really important. We talk about these things. It's not just about what you know, it is how you can promote your desire to do these things. And this is this intrinsic connection that can help us to behave consistently for a sustainable future. Sometimes it's not easy because it is not the common culture that we have, because in this business world, we always want to do something really quick. We see the outcome very quickly, something that is going to benefit ourselves very quickly as well. But if we talk about ourselves, our business, and the society, which is pretty much a marathon and not a sprint, it is not an easy ball game. And so I would just say that now, if we want to really do this together, we have to make this commitment together and to prepare that it is not smooth sailing. I hope we have the commitment, but knowing that we have to tackle issues together as well. How to align ESG with finance, as an example. This is triple bottom line, not single bottom line, but still we have multiple bottom lines to fulfill. And at the same time, it is not just externally to look good, but also internally really create something for ourselves as well, not just for today, but also for tomorrow. So I just really hope that we can learn this together. There is a short video that I want to show that is a kind of encouragement for all of us to do this together. Maybe this is just the beginning, but I think this is also very exciting. So let's look at this short video.
I believe it is in our nature to explore, to reach out into the unknown. The only true failure would be not to explore at all.
Sir Ernest Shackleton. He spent a lifetime taking on the Antarctic as a great explorer and as a glorious failure. Shackleton's dream was to be the first to cross the Antarctic, but within a month his ship got stuck in pack ice, crushing the Endurance, leaving him and his 27 crew struggling to survive in the freezing cold, camped out on drifting ice. Everything Shackleton salvaged from his sunken ship fit into just 3 lifeboats. To survive and be rescued, Shackleton took a 6-meter boat across 1,200 kilometers of water, was stranded on ice for 634 days, preserved the lives of his crew, and got them all back safe to England. His original dream ended in failure, but far greater was his astonishing leadership. A glorious failure. Now it's been 100 years. We wanted to fulfill his dream, and with special meaning.
My name is Patrick Burgle, and I am the great-grandson of Sir Ernest Shackleton. When the idea for this expedition came up, I was very excited. It is a unique story in that so many people are being brought together by this commemoration of the 1916 expedition.
I would say that his spirit is eternal, it lives on. That's why we're all here.
So that is Sir Ernest Shackleton. And actually recently there was a book called Leading at the Edge, using exactly the case of Shackleton, his extraordinary expedition, which is a huge case study for leadership as well. It says that we can learn the things needed to lead organizations to their full potential, and we can remember these principles when we ourselves are stressed, and challenged. And I just want to say that today, especially with the global pandemic, we are all being impacted. And how to do well, not just individually, but also collectively, corporately. We can all do our part to be meaningful contributors to a global society. and ESG as an opportunity for us to balance our business, our personal life, and also what is needed in the community. So I think this is a very exciting time for all of us. We happen to have a program coming along, which is going to be interactive online with a lot of exercise to analyze and also to reflect. That program will be facilitated by the three of us, Professor Galloway, Enoch, and myself. The completion will also bring to 200 hours of UK CBD hours, and is also credit bearing. One thing I want to mention is that we will also launch a youth program, which is a youth ethical leadership program that we will really hope that the professionals can also support as well, by way of being a guest speaker, special appearance, or even sponsorship. So if anyone will be interested in that, please contact us. So at that note, I just want to see whether there's been any questions being left in the chat box.
There's currently no questions in chat, so maybe if anyone wanted to ask a question, they could put up their hands. But in the meantime, Enoch, you mentioned IP theft. Do you think there are any other emerging ethical issues that we need to, that might be appearing soon?
I think there are plenty of those. The issue of IP theft is because it's something that's very, very difficult to put a legal ownership on it. Right now, there are lots of, people, they're looking from a financial, economic ownership of IP. So, it becomes a very gray line for business leaders to draw, and where to put the IP. Is it an IP? That's the first question. And then I think that the most important issue from a business ethical standpoint is human capital. How do we look at the society? As Professor Galloway was talking about, you're leading. You are looking at the overall business strategy, the organization or the institutional issues, and all of these things that comes with people. And how do these kind of issues float into the IP? And of course, there are also right now is the digitalization. Where are you going to put the money if you are driving a network or selling things online? You can do it very dodgily, or you can know where the legal loopholes are, so that government, they would not know where the physical products are being produced, the physical products are being shipped. So there are lots of businesses, especially right now, if you are also looking at the the big data. You're looking at the Bitcoin. A lot of all these things becomes an issue from a business standpoint, that government wants to look into it. The OECD wants to look into it. They're trying to come up with guidelines to align all kinds of government authorities so that business can act ethically, morally, responsibly. But it's still very difficult. I think it's still very difficult. I think actually, Steve, there's a question for Professor Galloway on virtual leadership. What are the key virtues need to be needed by an effective and ethical leader?
I guess I'm an academic. I'm always going to return to theory, but I think it does actually serve quite well in this instance. And in particular, the most up-to-date theories on leadership are about distribution and sharing leadership and whatever. but they kind of all come out of transformational leadership theory. And there are 4 principles in transformational leadership theory. And I actually think that if you adhere to these 4 principles, you have actually almost crystallized ethical leadership. So the first 2 principles are about your idealized influence and your inspiring conduct. So it's about you as the leader, and it's about your behavior. Are you a role model? Are you doing things that other people should be emulating? Is your conduct representative of the conduct you would like to see in others? So it's looking at yourself first, and looking at your own conduct and your own attitudes to work and life, etc. And then the second 2 are really about the followers, about the other people, the people that you are leading, and their intellectual stimulation. So are people actually challenged and motivated? Are you actually engaging them to develop and grow? Because people don't just go to work to earn money. They go to work to earn money and a whole bunch of other things. Most people don't want to stay still. They want to learn new things. They want to contribute. So are you allowing them to do that? And then the last thing is, do you know them? Do you understand that these people are people? They're individuals, that your workforce is not really a workforce. It's a group of individuals. And now you can't, if you're a CEO of a multinational, you can't know everyone, but you can know everyone in your team, and everyone in your team should know everybody in their team. So it's this idea that people are individuals with real lives and real worries and real concerns and real ambitions. So those are the 4 guiding principles, I would say, that underpin, but you could crystallize it even further by just saying, what's ethical leadership? Well, it's something to do with trust, mutually, backwards and forwards, between leader and follower, and it's something to do with respect, backwards and forwards, between leader and follower. And that, for me, that probably would sum up virtuous leadership.
There are no other questions, Janny, but I've got one for you. And I wondered what your key takeaway you would like people to leave today with would be.
The key takeaway is that ESG, although it is a report, it is something that is more than what we can just show on paper. In reality, when, say, a management consulting firm coming to you, they will want to know that we are not just reciting our achievement. They will want to know that how people will take ownership of the issues and try to apply through their business and make impact. So I would say the key takeaway will be to promote our intrinsic effective skills on top of our understanding, our knowledge, which is cognitive skill. In today's society, many times we want to celebrate our achievement through what we know, but how we feel and how we can communicate that is extremely important. So we can also put it in a very simple term, that is communication and personal skill, people skill will be something that is extraordinarily important, especially during this time that we all need to work together. So that is my 2 cents. Thank you. All right, so if we don't have any other questions, I will just have to thank everyone for coming. So thank you very much again. I hope to see you very soon. Thank you.